I'll go ahead and get started.
Excellent.
Great. So greetings, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Brandy Ryder. I am the executive director, the new executive director of the Colorado Broadband office. And I appreciate all of you joining our call today to go over the executive order that was recently executed by Governor Polis last month. And so it's just a pleasure to be leading the helm of the broadband office in this historic time. And so it's gonna be a great effort by our team and as well as everybody across Colorado. So with that being said, I'll just kind of go ahead and jump into the meat and potatoes of today's presentation. Like I said earlier, I'll be discussing or giving a quick overview of the executive order. I'll be talking about our strategic plan. And then I have Kate Sneed and Sarah Smith on the call to talk about some of the other outreach plans as well as our funding and support directives. And then what we'll do at the end of, we'll hold our questions till the end of the presentation, and then we'll go from there and then leave some time for discussion. So with the EO, like I said, it was Governor Polis executed this EO in February, and it really lays out the directives and strategies and policies and goals for the state of Colorado for broadband coverage and service. And really the crux of it is, the focus of the EO is we're focusing on equity, access, and affordability as it relates to the broadband office. Okay, sir, if you can go back a couple of slides, I'm just giving the overview real quick, and I'll jump into the details here in a second. But the goal really for the EO is to serve 99% of Colorado households by 2027. It's a really great, ambitious goal, and I think we'll get there as far as all the funding opportunities we have to fund broadband over the next several years. We'll be leveraging programs from the American Rescue Plan Act, as everybody knows, ARPA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, and other Treasury and NTIA programs. So we're well funded, and we hope to achieve our goals for coverage for Colorado. The EO itself obviously gives the Colorado Broadband Office some directives, and just a high level, generally speaking, what it includes is strategy, partnership, efficiencies, and really bringing together the state agencies as well as the state on executing and implementing broadband. The process will be transparent, a lot of community involvement, engagement, and then obviously it includes other agencies like CDOT, the Office of the State Controller. So I'm really pleased about and very thrilled about the opportunity for collaboration, both internally, the state of Colorado, as well as our communities and industry partners out in the field. So this slide here talks kind of a little bit about our broadband coverage metrics. It's a pretty simple map, but this covers the data periods are from 2012 to 2021. And basically, we're looking at statewide coverage to households at 98.1% as of October 2021, 25 megabits per second down and 3 up. And so, and then obviously, we just want to capture kind of the trends here. So we are trending in a really well, we're trending pretty well. I mean, we do have major digital divides, but I just want to give a snapshot of where we are, or where we've come and where we are. And if you look at the rural coverage, is which we're kind of focusing on at the Colorado Broadband Office, focusing on the underserved communities in our state. We're looking at 93% or 93.1% as of October 2021, with 25 down, 3 up. So the speeds, I don't know about you all, but I live in the town of Eagle, Colorado. I lived in rural Colorado for about 10 years now. I worked in rural Colorado for about 15. And I will tell you 25.3 it's really hard to do regular business, run your households, and also, it's hard for schools, libraries, healthcare, all of the services that we rely on. Do you have these numbers broken down by other speeds? We do, but we don't have those covered in this presentation. My team can follow up with you on that question. So we do have those data points and we can share those with you. Thank you, Shannon. Next slide. I have a comment from Mark here. We can certainly look to provide some of those numbers for you, wired versus wireless. I can get with my team to see if we have those data points too after the presentation. So like I said, the directives of the Executive Order 2022-009, 99% coverage of high-speed broadband by 2027. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, please send your questions to Sarah Smith. She's on the call. She will follow up with everybody on your questions related to specific data points. So the Colorado Broadband Strategic Plan is part of this. In our executive order, we do call out, and I'm pretty excited about the Broadband Strategic Plan. Typically, when you do these major broadband initiatives, it starts with a strategic plan. And I'm thrilled to say that it involves the entire state of Colorado. We are working on this, and hopefully we'll be able to present some of the results of this strategic planning effort by August 2022. This is in the executive order. Our outreach plan will solicit feedback from industry, stakeholders on the plan, as well as grant programs and federal funding. A lot of the feedback that we will receive will be included in our applications for federal funding later this year. So we really are going to ask, we're going to really get out there into the state of Colorado and solicit this feedback. We're in the process of finalizing our selection for the strategic plan, the firm that'll help us here over the next 2 months. This will include a roadshow or a community outreach tour. This is also in the EO. We'll be doing this through June. And so again, collecting feedback. I know our staff has done a really great job of doing some listening sessions. So this will definitely dovetail and complement the work that they've been doing over the last couple months. Like I said earlier, interagency coordination with departments. I know if any of you have worked with the state of Colorado, we definitely want to make sure that we're not taking a siloed approach, that all the departments, for example, like CDOT, are on board, that we're communicating on our broadband goals. So we'll set some performance goals around that to make sure that we're collaborating, we're streamlining our communications and processes internally, but also externally. Collaboration with industry is important to support our broadband needs. I think, I'm always a huge fan of the more brilliant minds in the room, the better policy making that we can come up with. And a lot of this includes industry because they're out there every day doing it. And so there's a lot of technical experts out there that'll help inform our process, and we look forward to hearing from our industry partners. Also in our interagency collaboration, workforce, looking at some of the workforce collaborations, obviously with OFOW ordinances, and we're also looking at legal barriers, and I'll kind of highlight some of those a little bit later on in this presentation. But we do call out specific broadband plans for CIA, tourism, state parks, state prisons, tribes, telemedicine, rural communities. So those are some of the actual targeted industries and sectors that we want to include in our outreach for not only our strategic plan, but also to make improvements in broadband and connectivity for those stakeholder groups. The review grant process and applications from grant programs, again, we're always trying to streamline that. And so, we want to make that as easy as possible for our communities and our partners to access funds. I know sometimes, they can be a little cumbersome. So we're really making sure that we dial in on how making it not so bureaucratic for our folks to apply for funds, if we can, of course, the things that we have control over. I know some of our federal funding opportunities, they do require a few extra steps, but we are here. The CBO, Colorado Broadband Office, is here to be a technical advisor and assistant to help those communities and partners access those funds. Next slide. Our outreach and engagement plan, we will be doing listening sessions on our roadshow, when they're probably mostly centered, especially when we look at the eligibility requirements from our federal funding around middle mile connectivity. And so we have quite a bit of funds available for that. And so we'll be having a lot of conversations with partners to help to help build out middle mile, whether it's publicly owned or privately owned. We really want to push that. I think that's one of the biggest ways that we can distribute and deploy broadband across Colorado. And so, this includes, electrical utilities, counties, obviously regional councils of government, folks that are out in the field building middle mile, as well as our ISPs. So we're really going to focus on that. And then the next thing I want to talk about, and this really it speaks to the point of legislative, barriers, risks to broadband deployment. I know some of you are aware of Senate Bill 152. This legislation was passed in 2005, which requires, local government in order for them to engage in broadband activities, really outside of just providing services to their own facilities. You cannot engage in those types of activities unless you ask your voters to opt out of that piece of legislation. And so, we see this being somewhat of a challenge to broadband deployment in Colorado. And so not just for local governments, but also for private industry. A lot of these funding opportunities really encourage public-private partnership. And, it starts with the public, but then, you partner with the private sector industry to help build some of these really, really great projects out. And this piece of legislation prohibits those kind of activities. So we're working with our local governments and the state legislature right now to try to figure out how do we move the needle in this space with Senate Bill 152 and being at play and maybe rethinking some things, some of the issues around having that piece of legislation in place. So it's really key, and it's one of probably our biggest barrier to success right now when we look at the future of federal funding. So part of our roadshow include collaborations, looking at existing projects and funds that are invested. One of the things that the state of Colorado really encourages is leveraging existing assets, but also leveraging investments that communities have already made in broadband. I know working out in the field in local government as a town manager, accessing funds for broadband, this was something that was really helpful and really made for better projects. So we'll be looking at finding, learning about collaborations that are going on right now and potential collaborations out there with all of our stakeholders, because we think those collaborations and consortiums are really a really good model that you see that are successful across the country. Stakeholder specific listening sessions, like I said, we have the list in our executive order. Really the focus is underserved areas, which includes rural communities. How do we engage our private industry, local government, tribes, community anchors like libraries, education, healthcare, and prisons. And so those are all laid out in the executive order. And then the last piece of our outreach is collaborations with state agencies. Our strategy that we're developing this year also takes an internal look at how the state of Colorado engages our residents and businesses and visitors and everybody that comes to Colorado, whether you're visiting or living here. How does the state of Colorado use technology to create, to support innovation and make the state of Colorado a user-friendly entity for the people that do business with the state of Colorado, because innovation, technology, and access to broadband all work together. And so we want to make sure we bring the whole project full circle and capture everything. Next slide. So I'm going to hand this over to Kate Sneed. She's our fiscal recovery officer, and she has a really great history with the Office of Information Technology, and she's been supporting the Colorado Broadband Office for quite some time. She's really well versed in all of our funding programs. And so I'll let her kind of talk about the buckets of funds. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Go ahead, Kate.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Good to see so many familiar faces. This is mainly not really any new information, just another kind of display of it. As most of you know, we've got the ARPA funding, the state local fiscal recovery funds, and the capital project funds coming our way. And then in the last, probably, I would say, I don't know, 2 weeks, Sarah, would you think we've gotten a lot of clarity on and upcoming deadlines for this information, or the grants that are coming out of the IIJA? So the BEAD program, which is the infrastructure program, that is based on the FCC maps. However, I'm losing track of time, but I believe it was last Tuesday, the legal battles at the federal level around the contractor that the FCC has hired to do those maps was resolved. And so the FCC also announced last week the grant data submission timeframe for those upcoming required FCC maps will be June through September. And if you need more information on that, if you're a provider, we can definitely send you the press information that the FCC sent out. A lot more information, I'm sure, to come, but they're hoping to gather that data this summer and put together their fabric of data. They're hoping by the end of next year. We were on a call yesterday, and they were saying, or sorry, the end of this year, they were saying that if they can get the data by September and have all of it, that they can release their maps before the end of 2022. So most of us know that that is very positive thinking, and so we'll see if they're able to follow through on that. But we are guaranteed 100 million of that. The NOFO for that will be released, which is the notice of funding, will be released in May, and we'll have 60 days to respond to that for the initial funding of 5% for that, and then there'll be an additional kind of release once the FCC maps are released, etc. The middle mile program out of the IIJA is a competitive grant process, so it's not direct to agency, it's not a formula. And so again, that NOFO will be released in May. Our goal, or our hope, is that we could get around $17 million out of that. But again, it's a competitive grant, competitive process that's not only open to states, but it's also open to private industry, et cetera. So we'll be working on a plan for that so that we can have a response ready in May, knowing that then that money could potentially be available by the end of 2022 as well, which is great. We didn't think it would be available till next year, but hopefully we could get it before the end of this calendar year. Then there's a whole bucket of funds that are directly regarding the Digital Equity Act part. So first, there's a state planning grant. That's a formula direct to agency that we will get. And then part of that is also the state capacity grant. Those are really just around developing a state plan around how we are going to improve digital equity. And this includes everything from adoptions. So how do we go out in the community and help low-income individuals or all individuals enroll in the affordable care program or local programs and actually get subscribed, to how do we improve our workforce, to how do we have libraries in different places providing classes and courses on digital literacy, how to use the internet, what it means to have a modem and broadband and a router and all of those different kinds of things. That's a formula direct to agency. Our estimate is around 25 million, but we don't know yet. And again, that will also be a NOFO in May, which gives us 60-day response for the state of Colorado. And underneath, I just put directly from the federal legislation, the purposes of all of these funds. And so, as Brandy has identified, we'll be working on a strategic plan to fit into all of those areas, and how we'll plan on using all of this money. Sarah, you want to go to next? Thank you. So also just kind of quickly to put this all together in a timeline. So this upcoming May, the blue on this slide is the federal deadlines. The green are the deadlines from the executive order. So the blue is the release of the IIJA NOFO from the NTIA that we're expecting in May of 2022. July then would be when we would need to respond to those NOFOs, giving the 60-day time frame. August, as Brandy has highlighted, is when the strategic plan is required by the governor's executive order. September is when, for the capital project fund, which is the 171 million, our grant plans are due. That's the strategy for spending the $171 million, and was identified on the previous or 2 slides ago around the outreach. The capital project plans require stakeholder feedback data and how we have worked with community to really identify the need in community, and then how we're meeting that need through our strategic plan. And then through 2023 and through 2027, we'll be spending money or giving you all the money to go spend and implement whatever the strategic plan and the different grants have out. We'll also have lots of federal reporting and deadlines, which are always changing. They love to change up what they want at the federal level on a regular basis. And then again, as the EO states, by December of 2027, that we'll have 99% of in-state households will have high-speed broadband. And I'll just point out that the EO also defines high speed as 100 megabytes by 20 megabytes. So the slides at the very beginning with our data, as was pointed out, were 25.3. So we'll be working to probably update those so that they're in line with the executive order and the funding, since the funding is tied to that as well. And I probably should have it here on the timeline, but a lot of the federal funding also has a deadline of being spent by 2026 if it's from the ARPA funds, or within 4 years of granting if it comes from the other funds. So we definitely anticipate that by 2027, a lot of this funding will have been spent already, and we will be at that mark. So I think that is all. I'm happy to take questions. There's a lot of obvious detail in all of these different funding opportunities and things. That's my role. I'm managing that on our end, and the Colorado Broadband Office will work on how they roll that out to you all in grant programs in the future.
Great.
Craig's question: which timeline require the new mapping figuring out versus? So the only the capital project funds don't have a requirement around served and unserved or FCC mapping. It's just the BEAD program, which is the NTIA. So the deadline for the FCC mapping to be figured out is related to the blue funding, so the categories in blue. And we don't have a great idea of when that will be, but like we said, we're hoping that the FCC will release those by the end of 2022.
Great, thanks, Kate, for that rundown. One thing I want to add to the executive order, just a point of clarification, in our executive order, when we talk about speeds, the goal is to see 100 megabits per second down and 20 megabits or scalable up. So I think that and we're starting to be well served. We're starting to be served by that in Colorado. We have a long ways to go. I think we're about let me see. Oh gosh, I think we're about 60 or 90. We are at 96% coverage for some of that. And Sarah, can you clarify that for me real quickly?
Yeah, so when I say I mean Megan Gerdner and her team ran the numbers, and right now with the information that we received from the last data cycle in October of 2021, we have 96% coverage statewide of 100 up, 20 down. And Megan, I know you're on this call, so feel free to clarify more if I missed something.
Thanks, Sarah. So Sarah, she is going to be coordinating a lot of our federal program funding programs and outreach. She is our senior manager of broadband programs for the state of Colorado. She just took on that role, and so you'll obviously, a lot of you already know her. She's great. She'll be helping us out quite a bit with those programs. Sarah, is there anything that you want to add about any of your outreach strategies for the group?
Sorry, getting off mute. Thank you very much. Yes, and Mark, yes, to your answer, yes, it's the 96% coverage based on self-reported data from ISPs. So I want to do a quick shout out to the couple of people who've already sent me emails about questions and ideas on how to get involved in this process. And what I'll say is Kate, Megan, and myself attended the State Broadband Leaders Network Summit over the last 2 days, which is put on by NTIA. And one of the things that they really drove home for us is the need to work with the champions and communities, the people who are out there in the field doing this work to really, not only bring broadband to those areas, but to really understand the problem. So these listening sessions, which we're in the process of developing, we are at the very early stage. We're going to have collaboration from people like you. I'll call out Julia Beams, who sent me an email about having sessions for individuals with disabilities, having sessions for specifically telecom from Ralph Brown. We're going to hold sessions and would like to bring together sessions to speak to people like telecom experts to volunteer and help us. We want to hear from people who have specific disabilities that these broadband programs are really going to affect. In terms of the listening programs, these listening sessions, we want to partner with you guys to pull the right stakeholders to the board. So I already asked Julia to help me pull together a session for individuals with disabilities. If you'd like to be the champion to help us put together a listening session, we would really appreciate that. So please, again, my email, I'll put it out again, but please contact me. And then the final thing that I'll say is that we have the intention of setting up regular touch points. So we'll get into this in the question and answer, but we would really love to hear from everyone about how those regular conversations need to be happening. And I'm talking beyond the listening sessions, beyond the big road shows where we're out there talking about big things. We want to figure out how to have the conversations of the everyday things. How do we increase accessibility? How do we increase affordability in this area? How can we help support you if you're a community, get in touch with the right resources to bring broadband to your area? If you're an internet service provider, how do we make the connection to the local government or the local community or the community anchor institution that needs your help? So keep that in mind as we get through some of these, as we get to the open discussion. And I think that's it for me, Brandy. Thank you for the time.
Great. Okay. So we'll move beyond the funding timelines. We thought that it might be helpful to kind of show you a map of what's under the underserved versus served based on the data speeds that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. And as you can see, in the green is the served, the purple is some of the underserved, but we do recognize that there are pockets within the green that there's access and affordability and equity issues. So we're really working on identifying those pockets, but you can see, I think I can only speak for myself, but we all kind of know what we're seeing right now. And if you're in rural Colorado, you're experiencing it. So our goal is to really hone in on some of these areas, form partnerships and collaborations, and work with the federal funding programs to help turn this map green outside of the population center. So we thought we would just kind of give you a visual. An underserved is less than a 25 down, 3 up, and so as you can imagine, it's a struggle for those. And if you're on this call, you definitely experience it, or have you heard about it. So we just thought we'd give you an illustration kind of on what the state looks like currently. And I just want to thank my mapping team for putting this data together for the data that we have collected from the industry and folks out there in the field. Yes, you can get a map. It'll be on our website, this presentation, but if you want a map separately, that's fine. We can provide that as well, Nate. Moving along, next slide. So just at this point in time, we wanted to kind of hand the floor over to the room here and see if there's any discussion items. We kind of kicked off a few of our, we kicked off this discussion with a few questions that maybe that can kind of start the conversation. What's your initial feedback related to the executive order? What type of outreach is meaningful to you and your community? And, really, how can the CBO support the work occurring in your community or industry? I know these are really loaded questions, and I know we don't have all day. We could probably spend an entire day on these questions, but just some ideas to throw out there to open up the floor. So with that being said, we'll take some time to answer some of your questions and any thoughts that you have. So if you can just raise your hand, I believe somebody's there moderating it. So we'll call on you as we see your hand raised.
Amy Mitchell.
Yes, thank you. I'm a Park County Commissioner, and we are very rural and do not have a lot of pockets. And we've done a pretty good job in getting our more dense populated areas covered. But to take it further, we do not have the capacity as a small county for writing these grants for federal money access. They are so cumbersome and require so much labor to monitor and use the grants that they really can be very prohibitive for a small county. And then second, how do we go about attracting private entities to possibly do some additional build out? Because many of them are not even interested in looking at how we can solve the challenge in a very low density areas. Thank you.
Okay.
I can take the part about the federal funding. So thank you so much for joining us, Commissioner. All the funding that was on my slides is money that's going to be either coming to Colorado or Colorado will apply for. So the grant opportunities are really going to be through us at the state of Colorado, not through the federal government. However, I know that the Colorado Broadband Office is also considering or looking into additional staff to help in things like RDOF and the USDA Reconnect and how to apply for some of those things as well.
Yes, so part of our capacity building in the Colorado Broadband Office includes FTE that are federally funded to provide technical assistance to communities like Park County. I mean, you guys are very rural and you're very sparse and spread out, and you have small staffs and maybe even needing some of the technical expertise. So that's part of our spending plan. And so we're hopeful, and we'll have those folks on board for a few years to help with some of the technical pieces about grant funding, technology, and so forth. And I believe the other question was, how do you attract the industry to come to make investments in your community? Is that your other question?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a tricky question, and it's a hard one to answer, right? So I've struggled with that in my work working in rural Colorado. Who are the partners that are going to build these really complicated and really life-changing broadband projects? And how I would answer that, because it really is a lot of it is market driven, and unfortunately, the more rural you are, the harder it is. But one of the things that we're focusing on our broadband development board, and I would see this being a strategy for CBO in general, is to incentivize investment in areas like Park County and really focusing in on it. So hopefully, for example, a criteria for maybe a grant. This is just an example because we're still developing our strategy. Criteria is we're looking for projects from industry and local governments that are in this area of the state. And when we look at our maps, it's really easy to tell where those areas are, just from a data perspective, but also from a reality perspective. And so there's a role for the CBO to play in incentivizing private investment. And we can funnel some of those dollars, hopefully, to your area, at least make it a criteria for underserved areas. So we really want to focus that so that we can incentivize that investment in your area. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes,
Also,
thank you for recognizing that.
Yes.
Commissioner, I'll also just add, you are absolutely correct. Historically, there hasn't been a financial incentive, but we are estimating we could get upwards of $700 million. And so there's all of a sudden kind of a financial incentive as well. Sarah and I have already been connecting a lot of industry with local government. So please reach out to us, and we're happy to connect you with industry partners that we know are working and want to go into your area so that you guys can start having that conversation now.
Thank you, Kate. Appreciate that very much. I will get in touch.
I just want to acknowledge something that was said in chat to me was just recognizing that public utilities / rural co-op could equal broadband infrastructure. Anywhere there's electricity could equal broadband. I'm not sure your name is Nate Wallowitz, but I'm going to call on Nate Wallowitz.
Yeah, this is John Stabney. I'm sneaking in. I wasn't on the invite list, but I got the meeting invite through Nate, so it's John. Hey, COG, Northwest COG, I think has a rather unique relationship with CDOT, utilizing their fiber on I-70 with an IRU. And I know Brandy's very familiar with it, but, one thing that we've struggled with a little bit, CDOT's been a great partner, but, fiber is not their job one, if you will, right? Their job one is roads. But it'd be great if the CBO would advocate through the STIP or whatever the right vehicle is, so to speak, for advocating and getting prioritized some additional fiber. Now, I know that implies that other entities like COG or Region 10 would then be able to leverage those, but I look around the state at those unserved areas, and not all of them have a state highway going through them, but I don't think CDOT has its fiber builds prioritized based on underserved communities. And I think if the CBO could get in that conversation at whatever level is the right level, running CDOT fiber to those communities, a little like the electric co-op comment that was in there just a second ago, would be fantastic. And second, I don't know if it'd be possible. It seems a little strange for COG to apply for federal dollars for CDOT to put in fiber, but we've thought about that, connecting Steamboat Springs with Kremling with Summit County may not be a priority for CDOT for many, many years, but for us, from a redundancy standpoint, for our Project Thor middle mile project, that'd be fantastic. So it's a little odd for a COG, for instance, to be applying for federal monies for CDOT, but that I think could be something the state could coordinate and perhaps apply some of those dollars to. So more of a statement than a question, sorry.
And I'll just make a comment to your statement, John, and I appreciate you being on the call because, I have participated in our regional collaboration with Thor and that the whole project involved many partners and stakeholders, and kudos to you as a COG for taking that on when nobody else would. And so what I would foresee, and it's great because the executive order directs CDOT and many other state agencies to have those conversations about, okay, how do we leverage, existing assets that are owned by the state, whether it's fiber or whether it's, hey, we have a not an I-70 per se, because I know when we working with you, it was I-70 dark fiber, CDOT owned, that really connected the whole region. But okay, so yeah, it's a state highway, or it's even county road. Like how do we leverage our rights of way that the state has to do fiber? And so the EO does direct CDOT to collaborate with the CBO to have those conversations, because you're right. I think it's something that the state really should lead. To help support existing efforts like the COG, the Northwest Regional Council of Governments that you run. So that is absolutely something that's on the table.
William Patterson.
Hi, thank you. This has really been a good session. I'm a member of DMEA, which is Delta Montrose Electric Association and Co-op, who has built out elevate fiber in our community. And I'd recommend that any county or anybody else that's interested in this to talk to their electric provider, definitely. The other caution I have is that as we've looked into providing telemedicine type activity, we have found that the broadband requirements go up tremendously. 1 gig is really about the minimum if you're going to provide a telemedicine type of activity. And in fact, most of our hospitals are looking for 10 gig. And that kind of gets into how then do we get this extra broadband? And that kind of comes back to the major right-of-ways. And in addition, I mean, we're using the current Denver source, but we're looking to go through WAPA, hopefully, and try and get the federal government to participate in providing these links, if you will, to the major communities. So from a broadband office, that's one of the, I see several areas, but in particular, the need for really more broadband, higher speeds, especially if we're going to look at telemedicine in rural areas, and then the link up between the major communities, because we're becoming, if you will, limited in our broadband activity, especially in the higher speeds, because of the massive amount of data that's flowing.
Great. Thank you, William, for that. And, yes. And so all of that, right. Access to bandwidth, but affordable access to bandwidth. And that does really come with, identifying more fiber opportunities, or what I call more fiber strands to construct in the system, whether it's leveraging right of way or your electrical co-op or electrical company. And so the more fiber strands you can connect communities to, the more bandwidth that you receive. And so, part of our focus as a CBO and the federal funding is looking at that, because we all know the current speed situation is not adequate for a telemedicine, or even for a lot of the services that we rely on every day in our lives. And so that is something that we are looking at, and hopefully through our broadband development deployment board and various other activities, and looking at applications for grants and projects, that's part of it. And I do agree with you 100%. I do think that the utilities the existing utilities that are already there are great opportunities for adding fiber to utility poles, conduit, trenches in the ground. So the more fiber, the better. I think, one of the challenges that we're probably going to see, just like when you have a huge infusion of federal dollars, is, just where does that fiber come from and how long does it take? I know we're all struggling with supply chain and labor issues. So hopefully we'll work through all of that. But yes, you can't run a hospital on 1 gig or even telemedicine at all. You can't even hardly run a county commissioner meeting on some of the speeds that we have. So that is something that we're absolutely focused on.
Hey, Mark, I see you. Nice to see you. You're up next.
Oh, great. Thanks. I was just going to say, and I think I've already been in conversation with Sarah about leaning on the local governments, especially counties, to assist in pulling together those stakeholder and community meetings. We have a lot of interaction with the community. I mean, in our case, because we love to have natural disasters, we have strong connection with the same communities that also have issues with connectivity. It seems to be the ones that have had emergencies over the last X number of years. So I think we can be really critical to pulling together the right communities into a forum so you can get real world examples of what the challenges they're facing in terms of what providers might be reporting and what they're actually seeing in their community in real life, and how that's impacting their ability to start up local businesses, do telemedicine, and other sorts of things. So I know our community in our county was very willing to participate in helping pull together those conversations, so you have a better flavor of what it's like to be in communities like ours. We're unique in the fact we have a real divergence between connected and unconnected. We're creating a real digital divide with a lot of the projects going on in the municipal governments in Larimer County. And it's actually amplifying the problem in the more rural or more less populated areas of the urban fringe, I'll call it, that have really shoddy or difficult connectivity. I would suggest if, at some point, I know the feds are trying to tweak their speed requirements to lean a little more on wireline or measures of latency, which actually drive a lot of the ability to do remote work. I know we're getting kind of technical in our standards, but 120 may be achievable, but still not be workable in certain types of technology. And so understanding that a little bit better. Then lastly, as far as how can you help, I think just, what you're doing, advocate on behalf of Colorado. We applied recently for some federal grants, and I saw 95% of them went to the East Coast. There was only like 2 west of Mississippi, I think. And I found it kind of shocking because our project looked as good as any of the other ones that got money. So I don't know what we need to do to advocate for the needs of the West. But I'm a little concerned about our ability to compete for money if we're not providing good speed test data to the FCC as part of this process. So that's my feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, great, good feedback. And I just want to make a comment on your last point, because all your other points are obviously, they're spot on, and hopefully we'll capture some of the real world stories and scenario, just the real world reality of the lack of broadband in Colorado in our strategic planning session. But we are in talks, we've been in continued talks with our federal delegation on how Colorado can be competitive, put ourselves in the best competitive position to receive those grants, the grants that we're working on, because population centers, obviously, the further east you go, there's more dense, it's just more dense economies of scale, people, so we're working on the political side of things to help advocate for the grants in Colorado. So I just want to let you know we're having open and active conversations with everybody at the top so that we can move the needle on competitiveness.
And I just want to, give a shout out to Mark, because the work that he's doing is really important, and especially applying for those federal funds can be really difficult. Some of the funds that he's talking about is the BIP program that just announced last week. But Reconnect Round 3, they just extended the deadline till March 9th for the application. So there's still time to get in an application.
The application is daunting. I would suggest there probably isn't time, because we are applying for that for the Red Feather Lakes area. Mm-hmm. Pretty excited about our application, but also tentative based on the selection criteria. But I could tell you it takes probably a couple months to prepare an adequate application through Reconnect. It's daunting.
Fair point, Mark. And it's definitely something that we are working towards, and having this goal of 99% coverage. I think we're really clear in our office that the funding that's coming directly to the state will help us get there, but we also need to help organizations apply for the funding at the federal level and deploy it on their own. So we are, in the process of that, understanding those intricacies and where the funding for positions like that can come from that can help people apply for that. So thank you for your comments. Dan?
Yes, thank you for the session, and appreciate your guidance. My firm, Municipal Capital Markets Group, we do funding of projects, and some of our clients, one of the biggest challenges that we see that they face in this space is the notion of putting together the business plan and all of the technical pieces. Again, to submit one of these applications, it seems you're gonna need to do a lot of pre-engineering, figuring out which technologies you want to use, who's going to connect, who's going to be the service provider. And on top of that, you got to build a business case and financial plan. And it seems all of these things need to be done even prior to figuring out how you're going to submit your application. So I guess I'm wondering, do you guys have kind of a framework that you're thinking through to help communities in so much as they're going to need a lot of different private sector kind of consultants and whatnot, or teams to pull all these different elements? Do you have any kind of thoughts on how a community would go through the process? And again, we know all the partners and we can bring to a table, but I guess I'm just wondering what's the natural way for a community to submit this application? Like the woman from Park County, the commissioner mentioned, like it takes a whole lot. And again, we know there's a lot of complexities before you can even apply. So how do we address that? Do you have any thoughts?
I do have some initial thoughts, Dan, and I appreciate your assessment, and it's accurate. Just from my experience in local government, it took me 3 years and I don't know, $500,000 just to get to a point where I could actually raise $10.7 million for a municipal ISP, and it included all of the components that you mentioned. And so, in terms of offering, some thoughts on that, it does take time, it does take resources, and fortunately, there are funds for that sort of plan development, because they do ask you for all those details, and so for us, the CBO's role, I think, I first see us kind of helping support you in the steps for the process and identifying funds to help you pay for those, the engineering, the specs, the all of this, the network engineer, the design, all of that stuff. And then there's also the community input piece, especially on the county side of things. And so, our role is really to help support you identifying funds to develop those strategies. But it does take some time, and we do have time in these funding cycles. And hopefully, I don't have a crystal ball, but I would imagine that there will always be some funds out there for broadband. But it does take a lot of pre-work depending on which grant program you're going for, right? So we're here to help you identify those pots of funds to help you pay for those.
You had mentioned earlier that there may be some planning grants available through the state that aren't necessarily through the federal programs.
That's correct.
Is that a way to maybe get to that step?
Yes, it is. And so when I was in the field in the trenches, like you all, I really leveraged Department of Local Affairs for those funds. And really what that looked like was a partnership between, my municipality, I guess in your case, it'd be the county, and my consultant, my industry partner to help develop those plans. And I received $500,000 over 3 to 4 years to do that. And I say 3 to 4 years because it doesn't take 3 to 4 years for everybody. It just took 3 or 4 years for my town council. So I would say if you need to move it quickly without some of the restraints that some of the federal dollars have, Department of Local Affairs is a great resource.
Thank you. I'm sorry, just one more question. Is there an expectation that local funds need to be contributed at the end of the day? Again, for a $20 million project, does the Fed expect that maybe they'll allocate 10 million, but the local community has to come up with the other 10 million? Is there an expectation of bringing, again, that local match?
Some of the programs do require, and I think Sarah, or Kate, can you speak to that?
Yep. So the federal requirements, the BEAD program and the programs through IIJ do have a match. The governor of Colorado is actually right now learning about and investigating more on these required matches and trying to determine if he's going to set any of the state funding aside to help with match. So it's yet to be determined. There is a 30% match with the, hold on, let me pull up my slides. Or Sarah, can you go back to that slide? Sorry, it's not on my screen.
Hold on.
I don't want to get my percentages wrong because I confuse them for the different ones. The middle mile is 30%. The BEAD program is 25% match. And again, I'm working right now with the governor's office to try and have some state funding, or actually some ARPA funding set aside to meet that match, so that we can be more flexible in the state granting program and what we require for a match.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, William, you're up again.
Yes, thank you. I just want to state it that we just received our first federal grant, and I want to go along with Park County. I mean, it's about 3 levels of difficulty above the state grant. We have found the state office, especially the broadband office, to be just a tremendous resource for getting broadband into our community. And I really would encourage anyone to participate with the broadband office. And getting the federal grants, it requires outside help, is the best way I can put it. You can't just walk in and think you're going to do it. It takes a lot of expertise, and we went outside as much as we needed to. But we did get a grant. We're moving forward with it. We're excited that it's providing us a way to get that last mile for our members. So, thank you.
Yeah, and I agree with William. In my local government experience, anytime I've applied for a federal grant for really anything, including broadband and other aspects of local government, I've usually had to hire somebody to help my community fill those grants out. It's not too incredibly expensive. I always rationalize it as it's really great return on investment when you're successful.
I just wanted to add, I got a message about wanting to ensure that stakeholdering is done in a consolidated manner because of the NOFOs that are coming up, the notice of funding opportunities. It's a short time period. So again, I'll just plug that we are definitely aware that it's a short time period, and that's why we are really going to be leaning on you all, our stakeholders, to help us gather the right people together to have those meetings. So I'll just put it out there too. Like if you have an idea for stakeholdering, or you have a specific group that you'd like us to talk to, please email me. Kate and I will make it happen. I'm volunteering Kate in this situation because she's my left side, so but we are happy to accommodate you guys, and it's really important to us that we hear from you. And I'll go as far to say it's actually a requirement of the capital projects funds that we prove that we've been doing outreach to our community. So we actually can't really gain access to those funds without proof that we're working with our communities to do this outreach. So it's kind of in my perspective, it's an opportunity for us as a state to come together and really not only show to the federal government that we're capable of not only handling the money, but also deploying broadband in a way that leverages all of our programs, leverages all of our stakeholders, leverages our incredible industry subject matter experts who, we can't do this without, but it also gives us an opportunity to create meaningful change for Coloradans. So we need to do that all together. Okay, we're at 12:30. This technically goes until 1. So we can have, we have a half an hour of additional questions. So don't be shy. Please speak up or put things in the chat. Sorry, Craig, go ahead. I was getting off mute there.
Hey, as you think about statewide broadband, and I think there's comments in federal as well as the EO about using existing assets. Do we have a baseline for existing assets, and will there be a public repository for seeing what's all out there? And that can include spectrum assets. For example, down in Four Corners, where Ute Mountain and in Cheyenne, they might have 2.5 gigahertz spectrum from the open window. It may be some of the CDOT assets and the vault and the POP and the circuit locations. That kind of stuff. Is everyone's trying to work and solve this. Do you think there'll be a central clearinghouse that people can see?
I know we have, so we've done a lot of mapping, but we're kind of we're at the beginning stages of, I don't want to say we haven't started, but we are starting to look at existing assets. As you can imagine, there's a lot out there that some state has, and some of those assets are not the state's. And so, it's a huge data collection effort. And so, so I will say we're looking at it. We don't have anything really out there that's comprehensive. I think one of the bigger challenges with asking for, and I don't know if this is a challenge, it could be, but getting providers to disclose their asset locations. I know some do and some don't like to do that. So we'll understand that as we continue to collect data on existing assets. I think sometimes what I've experienced is, we say, oh, we don't think this area isn't served by fiber, but then there was a provider that put fiber in years ago and nobody knew about it, right? And I've kind of experienced that where we made investments where we didn't really need to because some assets already existed. Colorado's a big state. There's a lot of different folks, a lot of entities that do have assets. So we're working on it, but it'll take us some time. But we do realize sometimes you don't. In order for you to know what you need to build, you have to know what you have. And so we'll do our best in that space, and hopefully we'll get some participation from people and companies out there that have these assets out in the field. So that's kind of where we are with that question.
That's
great. Yeah,
sorry.
Thank you for that.
Go ahead, Sarah. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say this might be an opportunity too for Megan to just talk really high level about the RFP that we have on the street right now about data and mapping services, just that is going to add to these efforts of outreach. But to Brandy's point, any assets that are not owned by the state, we can't share, even if they do share their location with us, we can't share that location unless they allow us to. So I'll let Megan just talk really high level about the RFP. For those of you that might be interested in applying, it's open. So go ahead, Megan. And again, sorry to put you on the spot.
No worries. Yeah, so we do have an RFP out right now for some data and mapping services to support our program. Some of those mapping services will help us, collect all these different sources of data and put it all together in a meaningful way. So that's kind of the goal of what we're asking for in that RFP. And I will say that with the collecting asset data, exactly what Sarah said, we're not necessarily able to share everything that we've collected, and it's been very difficult to collect information from private companies to help for our planning purposes. So we're still working on that. And that's all I've got.
Thanks, Megan.
There was a question, Brandy, in the chat from Lori Adams. Lori, do you want to just come on and ask your question?
Sorry about that. I was unmuting. Had to unmute. I noticed that with the NTIA program, the Broadband Infrastructure Grant Program, where awards were given out last week, that awardees were required to be in covered partnerships, which is where a private provider was in a partnership with a local or state government. Are you anticipating, are you hearing from NTIA that same type of partnership model will be required for the BEAD program, or encouraged, if not required? Thanks.
Sarah, Kate, you guys can take that.
Yeah, Lori, it's a great question. So, it's really interesting that, as Sarah said, we virtually attended a conference in DC the last 2 days, specifically with the NTIA on these. And for the first time, at least in, my short time in this in the last couple of years, they aren't providing much insider feedback on a lot of those things. So I think it's yet to be determined. One thing that they continually reminded us or reiterated is that the actual law itself, the IIJA statute, is very clearly trying to put the power in the hands of the local of the state governments, instead of NTIA developing a program and pushing it down, saying, okay, we're just going to give the states all this money and let them do what's best for their community. So I think based on my gut response, based on what we've saw the last 2 days at this conference, is that a lot of that will be up to us at the state level. But until they're working on, they kept saying, and we're working on our NOFO right now, so you'll know more in May, so I don't have a great answer for you, but my gut is they're really trying not to control how we do it and let the states figure it out. I think we've seen some great state partnerships in that way. So I think that might be something that we consider, but we can't speak yet to will it be required or not, but I think we think it doesn't hurt to have a lot of partnership. What does that look like? Will it be required? Does it have to be a very legal partnership? Who knows? But I don't anticipate NTIA to be super straightforward on that.
Thanks.
That was such a diplomatic response from Kate, given how much funding is coming out and how quickly the NTIA is trying to move. There's just, the truth is just a lot is up in the air right now. So
it's called me while I was asking that question.
Okay, so we've got a little bit more time. Any other questions? Go ahead, Denise.
I'm with the Colorado Educational Broadband Coalition, and we are working with schools to do their requests for proposals for broadband to the schools. But the shift now is that schools need to be providing connectivity remotely to homes for students. And so I would encourage, or I guess I'm asking, I don't see a lot of school focus in some of the outreach and stakeholders, and certainly we're going to have a pretty big need for that. So we'd like to work with you.
Great, Denise, if you will send me an email, I will work with you directly to put together a group session for schools. And we do have it in the EO. K-12 schools are in there. So not only are we interested, but we're also directed to do it.
Okay,
no problem, thank you. Craig again?
Hey, thanks. What's the best way to keep track of all the different funding programs, past and present, where people are building at the same time, and how do we keep track of not stepping on someone else's toes? For example, we have 76,000 locations in Colorado from 8 providers that will serve the unserved from RDOF, and that'll shave that out of our 200,000 that we try to get, but that's a 10-year commitment, and so it may or may not happen. The current maps, OIT maps, they track kind of what have you done, but is there a way to do it? What will you do, and what is the actual versus the plan?
I don't know. Sarah, do you have a response to that at all, that question? How are we tracking the projects that are going on simultaneously? I think that's a really, in terms of what's happening, legislatively, the grant programs, obviously our website is a good resource, but in terms of tracking what's happening in the industry, I think really it's communicating to us, obviously we ask for, we know what we fund as the CBO, and we're happy to kind of provide that, and you can look at our website and ask us about those projects. But in terms of self-funded industry projects, those are a little bit harder to keep track of because, if it's not tied to state or federal programming, it's kind of word of mouth. And so, it might be something that we try to focus on through our funding cycles, even though we might not be funding it, in the spirit of leveraging dollars, whether it's private investment or government investment, we can keep track of those and have that information as we receive that information. But some of it will probably be voluntary or just word of mouth in the industry. So I don't know if that helps you answer your question. I'd love to be the repository for every single broadband project in the state of Colorado, but it's a little bit of it's a hard nut to crack, and it relies on folks in the field to report those. But as we learn about projects, we will try to make sure that we keep track of them and communicate when we're asked, kind of what's going on. So hopefully that answers your question.
Craig, are you
Craig,
speaking directly to the RDOF and like different federal funding?
Well, it's everything. Like the CARES Act pushed out their deadline by a year, and so people were putting towers up until December 31st, 2021. And so those towers will come online, and they're going to serve fixed wireless access. They're going to serve very rural areas, and we don't even know about those locations yet. On a previous call, someone asked, how many facilities-based providers are in the OIT map, and I think it was around 100. Which is roughly about 2/3 of the facility-based providers that file 477 filings for Colorado. So there's still a lot of outreach to do, and I don't think all those people are coming to the OIT maps or to these funding places as a central clearinghouse before they do their thing. And so if one of the mandates is to have efficient capital allocation and not overbuild what's already being done, there's probably more to be done.
Yeah, no, totally. And all the legislation requires that we don't overbuild. Well, I shouldn't say it requires, because everyone's a little different, but we do need to keep in mind anytime there's state or federal funding. I see Megan put her hand up, because I don't want to misspeak, Megan, but I'm pretty sure that our number one, I've been working with Megan, have been trying to get some of the RDOF and USDA data so that we can put that better on our maps. But I believe through our RFP that Megan has sent out, we'll also be able to use different data sources to gather what else is out there. But Megan, I'm going to let you jump in.
Yeah, that's absolutely part of the RFP. We're looking for the ability to build a system that keeps all of that up to date. Right now, we have access to a lot of that information through federal sources, but we just don't have the capability and the manpower to keep it up to date for you all, for our public. So if we want to do a better job of communicating that information out to our stakeholders, the people who are building in Colorado, we need to keep that more up to date. And the other thing I'll speak to on the number of providers on our map, our mapping is still voluntary. The legislation that was passed last year, requires any provider who wants to participate in funding to give us data. But there are still providers who aren't planning to participate in funding and don't want to give us their data. There's a number of providers on the FCC data who have a census block on the edge of Colorado, but their service is really in Nebraska. So there's a couple of those. We've been trying to work through the list and figure out who are missing and reach out to those folks. So if anyone knows of a provider who is not on the map, please reach out and we'll start reaching out to them.
Awesome. All right, Dan, you have the stage.
Can you hear me okay, Sarah?
I sure can, thank you.
That's the first thing I wanted to say before we get into it is, Brandy, I just wanted to welcome you to the circus, as they say. It's great to have a new face in the group. And for those who've been around the block a few times, feel free to reach out if you want to learn any question. There are a lot of people on this call who've been involved in broadband in Colorado for well over a decade. And there's some pretty deep history if you want to try to reach out. To jump back though, to the information at hand, I just wanted to ask Megan just a couple of questions about the RFP. I wanted to understand whether this was separate from the one that came out from your offices last year, or is this maybe you extended the deadline for being able to file the RFP? The data and mapping stuff, to be quite blunt, does not have to necessarily, be tremendously better than the FCC's Form 477 stuff. Although that, I'm just going to tell people this who are on the call. Form 477 is based on marketing information and what the ISP is providing. But most of the information is marketing information that's asked for. I say that as an independent operator that has to file Form 477 with the understanding that, this is the only way that the politics of Washington could allow for decent granularity into census tract and census block information. But Megan, would love for you to, share a little bit about what's in the RFP with people on the phone, and just talk about the details of, is it still open? Is it still available? Can people with viable and valuable tools come to the table to try to support Colorado's infrastructure requirement?
I'll go ahead and put the RFP in the chat. It is open right now, and due to that, we can't really speak to it. So I will put the RFP PDF in the chat. Megan, sorry to interrupt, but due to procurement laws and all of that, we will not be speaking to the RFP, but it is open and available at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. That's exactly what I was going to say. I think it closes on March 28th.
So it closes at the end of the month. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Any last questions? All right. Well, I'll just say for my part, and then I'll hand it off to Megan. I'm sorry, not Megan, Brandy. I promise not to put you on the spot again, Megan. Thank you so much, everyone who has already reached out to schedule time to set up some outreach. We really appreciate your participation and involvement in this. We can't do this without you, and we're so grateful that you're here to help us. So thank you for your time today.
Great. Thanks, Sarah, for that. And yes, I echo everything Sarah said. And just to add, I'm really happy to lead the Colorado Broadband Office. Like I said earlier, hopefully my experience in local government, building broadband systems and partnering with the industry and taking advantage of grants and all the funding that comes with broadband and partnerships and collaborations. And hopefully that will help serve me in my role and be able to communicate with you guys in the field effectively and help you move through the arduous process of federal funding and grant programs, and even some of the technical pieces too as well, because I do know that there's my local governments that need help with that as well, because I know I did when I was in the field. And so I'm really excited about this time in broadband. The funding is just incredible. The opportunities are endless, and I have a great staff. The Colorado Broadband Office, as you guys know, if you've been working with us for a while, we have a great team here to help serve you. And so we're all in this together. It's a new hat. I kind of like projects that, have a pioneer spirit in terms of, making things happen. This is definitely one of them. Like I said earlier, we have, if you want to know what we're supposed to be doing or how we're doing it, the executive order speaks to all of those details. And so, we have clear direction on what we need to do. And again, to Sarah's point, I would invite you to help us with this. And so, and I'm really happy. And I just want to say, I really appreciate all of you on this call. We'll be doing a lot of outreach. So, keep track of what we're doing at the CBO. We have the names and emails of everybody on the call. So we'll be reaching out to collect your thoughts and ideas. And again, if you need any assistance, my excellent, wonderful team will be available to help you. So with that being said, I'll give you a few minutes back in your day. And again, if you have any questions, let us know. But if that's it, we'll go ahead and conclude this presentation, and you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much.